Hi, my name is Janet Mahley. It's September 13th, and I'm here with an old Strathmerian, Horace Lorrilliere.
And I mean old.
I'm sorry. Anyway, he's got some great stories, so here we go, Har.
Okay. I talked to a school chum of my father's who was in the real estate business. And I asked him if he knew of any shore properties that were sale. And he mentioned, oh yeah, I have a lot of them. Some in Atlantic City, some here, some there. And I said, well, I'm not really interested in a place where there's a lot of people. I would like a small town. He says, well, I know of a place in Strathmere. And of course I won't go into the thing where is Strathmere. But he said it needs a bulkhead and a lot of work. I said, well, we could probably do that, and it's on the bay. And I said, oh boy, that's great, because I had a seaplane at that time, and I was looking for a place to keep my boats and seaplane. I asked my dad, I says, what do you think about this house? And so we went to the real estate person, and I got a key and a sketchy map and a kind of a location of where this house was. So my dad and I went to the Philadelphia Seaplane Base, where I kept my seaplane, what happened to be a Taylorcraft seaplane, and so we flew down to Strathmere and tied up on a rickety old pier that was about ready to collapse. We went in the house, we had the key of course, and we decided that the house had possibilities. And so we flew back, and on the way back, I said to my dad, boy, we're scratching and itching. And I said, what? He says, I think that the house was full of fleas. And I said, oh my gosh. So next weekend, we decided that we'd bring everybody from the family down. My father, my mother, my brother, and we'd all look around. So we looked around, and my mother said, we're not thinking of buying this dump. I said, well, everything needs work at the shore. And she said, well, okay, whatever you think, you're going to be the person that's going to be buying it. And I said, okay. So my dad and I and my brother all decided that with some work we could make it into a real nice place. So we settled down and said, yeah, this is really a fantastic, beautiful area. So we worked on the house. We replaced different things that need replacing, but the house didn't have any bulkhead. The bulkhead had completely washed away in previous storms. So we said, now who can we get to do this bulkhead? Well, the name of Johnny Libro from Sea Isle City came up. And they said, well, he could probably put a bulkhead in for you. So I said, okay. So I contacted Johnny, and we got a bulkhead put in, and then we also added a pier to it. And we cleaned and painted the house and fixed everything up. And then I bought a 16-foot metal boat, and at that time it was registered with the Coast Guard. And at that time you registered boats with the Coast Guard, and it was 11C22 and the license, and we used it for fishing and water skiing and recreational things like that. And we knew all the neighbors, and so My
I hear
name
you.
was Horace, my dad's name was Horace, and Mr. Mahley's, who was the next door neighbor, his name was Horace. So when anybody would come out and yell Horace, everybody came out. So it was kind of
Kind of
a
neat, yeah.
strange thing. Well,
Uh-huh.
to go back a little further, uh, the, uh, the the storm in '59, the boat sank. So my
It should be.
Oh, Horace,
I have to look at the camera more too, Har.
okay.
was the garage here when you bought the place?
Yes. Yes.
Metal garage.
The metal garage was here, and don't you remember telling me, I was showing you the picture?
Yeah, I know, but I didn't know if the garage
Yeah.
was here, the old
Okay.
metal garage.
Okay.
Now wait a minute, let me get
You get
squared
settled
away.
again there. Okay.
Uh,
Is that still the first page, Har? Or-
my brother Rob and I fabricated a floating dock that contained 12 beer cans. Now, these beer cans we purchased from a store that sold damaged beer cans. And they couldn't be used anymore because the contents would not be the right measure. So we got these 12 bill cans and built a 10 by 16 floating dock. It was a hinged plank in the middle that we kept the minnow cart under. So we would get minnows, put them in the cart, and keep them under the dock. The size of this floating dock was 10 by 12, and we fabricated a framework 20 by 20 with a cross bracing, and at the north side of towards the bridge we put down a 20-foot steel ramp with wooded creosoted decking on it, and we secured the ends of the dock to the end of the pier, which was an L shape, and we had that floating dock, and then we could bring down the seaplane and move the seaplane to the dock, and we could water ski from the dock. Then about the same time, I built a 14-foot airboat with a Continental engine that I salvaged from an airplane at Downtown's airport. And I took a lot of the people and kids for rides, and the kids, looking at the airboat, they named it the Aerodoodle. Now, how did they come with the name of the Aerodoodle? Well, Howdy Doody was a big thing on TV at that time, and that's how they came up with that. I took a lot of people for the ride in the airboat, and well, it was a noisy, muddy situation, and one of the people that I remember taking for a ride was Donna Eisenhart. And I said, well, Donna, what did you think? And she says, well, it was muddy, buggy, and full of cut-up swamp grass. I said, well, and she said, and lots of noise. I said, well, okay. So, that was that. My friend George Summershoe lived up the street from the house on Putnam Road. And he was in the real estate business by the same name, Summershoe Real Estate Business, with his father. And he said to me, you know, you have so many boats, airboats, ski boats, Silver Spray, and a sailboat, 14-foot sailboat. He says, well, you need a marina or a place to keep all these boats. So he said, I know of the lady that has that house on Putnam Road on the water, and he said she hasn't been in that house for years. And she says, I'll give you the name of her. His name, her name is Mrs. Perucci, and she has the Upper Darby bookstore. He said, why don't you go and contact her and see if she wants to sell it? So I contacted her, and she says, well, I really don't want to sell it. And I said, well, have you looked at it lately? She says, not really. I says, well, the water comes to within high tide of 3 or 4 feet from the corner of your building. So she looked at it, and she contacted me, and we got together, and she said, yeah, I'll sell it to you. So I bought the building, and I turned it into a marina and kept my boats there. Then it had no bulkhead, of course. So then I watched how the bulkheads were being put in, and I said, you know, there's really nothing to that, it's just a lot of work. So my brother and I decided that we would build a floating platform and put a crane on it and put in 100 foot of bulkhead. So we put in 25 foot and then a return and then a space and then another 25 foot, and then returned it back to the road. Well, as we were doing that, my neighbor, Mr. Coogan, says to me, why did you leave the cut back there and not have a bulkhead completely across the water? And I said, because I'm going to put a ramp in there, a concrete ramp. I'm going to pour a concrete ramp in there. He looked at me and he said, you're going to pour a concrete ramp in there? I said, yeah, so that I can bring my boats up into the building and keep them there and keep them in good shape. He said, well, he says, I don't know how you can pour concrete underwater. I says, well, if you can't pour concrete underwater, I said, all the bridges are going to fall down. So he was upset, and he didn't talk to me for a long time. We used the floating dock for water skiing and sailing and swimming from the dock. When in the water, we noticed things growing under the dock. And among these were sea grapes. Now, a sea grape is a little round thing, and you can pull it off, and when you squeeze it, water will squirt out. And I said, we better not do that. That might hurt the... I might get in trouble with the environmental people. So, we also, under the dock, we found seahorses and pipe fish. Starfish, barnacles, and lots of seaweed and other plankton. Tell you if you want to cut that. You want
Plankton. You want me to cut it off now?
Yeah. And after I got the floating dock at the marina, the pier, put in the new pier, bulkhead, and we had the silver spray, of course, and the kids all used to come down and say to me, are you going to take me water skiing? So I'd take 1 or 2 water skiing at a time. They kept. So I figured, you know, this is getting to be something, but it's nice taking the kids water skiing. So one time a lot of them came down and they said, would you take me water skiing? Would you take me water skiing? I said, yeah, sure. I said, but I'll tell you what. You go and get your water skis and I'll take you water skiing. So it took them about a half hour to get enough water skis, tow ropes, and everything together. So we got all together at the ramp and the floating dock, and we got all set up, and we got the tow ropes and everything tied to the boat, and we took 6 youth, children, whatever, water skiing all at one time. Well, that really didn't work out. We started out with 6, wound up with 5, then 4. Then we had to go back and pick up the ones that fell off, and then do that over and over. But we did have a good time because we took 6 people water skiing at one time, and we really had a great time.
Sounds like a fun day, Har.
Huh?
Sounds like a fun day.
Yeah, it was a great day. It was a great time. The kids were all good, and we all had a good time. But to mention that and put that into perspective, sometimes I would take
Look at that.
some girls and women water skiing. Well, lots of times they didn't land just right. And if you wouldn't believe it or not, but the tops of their bathing suits came off.
Oh my.
Well, luckily they stayed underwater. So anyway, we got that squared away. So,
You know who one of them was?
okay. Okay, when swimming at dark, with anything moving in the water, or fish, or anything that swam in the water, was like the ocean breakers on a dark night. You could see the fluorescence, iridescence, whatever it would be, and like the breakers. When the breakers would break, they would break with a greenish glow. And that was also the same thing that we noticed at night when we were swimming off the docks and piers. We had these egg-shaped, I'm going to call them jellyfish, and they had longitudinal and fluorescence. And the jellyfish, some of them were like saucers, some of them were like eggs. And if you would strike them when they're in the water, they would flash with the iridescence around the perimeter of the disc-shaped ones, and around from North and South Pole, all in bands all around the ones that were shaped like a egg.
Like an egg, right.
And so we did that and swam with the water, and watched the fluorescence, iridescence, whatever it was, like the same that you would see in the movies when the torpedo was going towards the ship, the green streak. Across from Frank's Dock and Fishing Pier and the Coast Guard Marine Railway, there was a sandbar at low tide. Around low tide, where the black skimmers flocked in that area. And the skimmers, they fish for the fish. And that continued, and they would go from the bridge up to the up the bay, and then when they introduced the jet skis in the area, the jet skis, I guess, scared away the black skimmers, so we didn't have them anymore. And being as we're on the subject of the Coast Guard, I remember at dusk they used to lower the flag and they shot off a cannon at the Corson's Inlet Coast Guard station. And at the same time, I remember Corson's Inlet when they had well-marked buoys, and you could traverse the water in that area without and get out to the fishing banks without fear of running aground. So then on Friday, are you still on?
Sure.
On Friday afternoons, I guess before dinner, the steerman dusters, crop dusters, would come over the island and spray the area for, I guess, mosquitoes. I think they were mainly skiing, spraying the people,
Wow.
and I guess it worked, but there was plenty of smell, and you had to close the windows, or otherwise you had a problem.
They don't do that anymore, though, do they, Har?
Yeah, we
No.
don't need any more spraying.
Right, no.
We got enough people dying with lung cancer and
Right.
everything else. Then the gang at, I guess I'll call them the gang fellas, at the trailer park, at the end of the season, they would put on a skit at the Duvel Inn. And I remember the show from the trailer park. And what they would have was, what they had was part of the park they called Schroeder's Odors. That was the south side. And the north side was called Call's Dolls. Now they incorporated that in a burlesque show where the men had inflated balloons fastened, taped, whatever, to their chest. And then they had, and that was, as I remember, Charlie Warmick and George Wilker were several of the dancers and entertainers in skimpy clothes. But one of the male singers, he was good. Well, he had a real good virtuoso of Bang Bang Lulu, and that was a doozy, I'll tell you. The song must have come from burlesque or vaudeville, but whew, it was something. Then we had, going on about that time, we had Dr. Rosenbach invited some of the people and lots of the people on the bay for a get-together, social get-together, and dancing and dining at his residence.
Where was that now, Har?
Down at the house at the end.
Oh, the Inn House.
The big
Big house, okay.
Yeah, the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Dr.
and
Rosen's
then
house.
The north side was where he kept his boat.
Okay.
It was a boathouse. It looked like a garage,
Right.
but it was a boathouse where he kept his garage, which is on the film.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to go into that.
Don't go into that, okay.
And then George Welker and his family used to invite us down, everybody down in the area for a crab feast. We'd have crabs and clams and everything. We'd have that on the lot beside his house. And he had a lot of good fellowship and a lot of good memories from that. And that went on for many years. Mm-hmm. Then while we were out fishing sometimes up by the bridge, you could hear the carillon chimes from the church floating over the air when we were fishing.
It's beautiful.
And the melodious chimes from the Strathmere Church were fantastic.
Har, can I interrupt a little bit? You're responsible for the music, though. For...
Oh yeah, well, yeah. Okay.
You're gonna...
So to bring that to an end or whatever, then they decided that the system they had to replace with a carillon. And then on 4th of July, we would put on another amplifier and a tape deck and play Sousa band march music from the tower steeple, because we couldn't use the carillon. It wasn't set up so that we could play that music from it. Also, I remember in that area, in that time frame, we had storms, and I would be out working on the Bayview Drive with rope over my shoulders, and people's chairs and drums and piles of wood would come floating down towards the meadows, So I would take a rope and tie around the different articles, chairs, whatever, and tie them to the telephone poles. So the people would come back on Saturday and decide what was what.
Who belonged to what?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
There
what
was
belonged to who?
walkways, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So
Also, you're going to tell us about after the '62 storm?
yeah, well, I wanted to get into just for a few seconds about Herb Hollinger.
Okay.
And Herb Hollinger was up the street, and he was well, there was an article written in the paper about him, so you know how great a fisherman he was. And we would try and find out his fishing spots, because he had the spots where the biggest and the most fish were in, and we tried to follow him, but he would give us hints of where they were. So, but we never caught the big ones like he did.
Like he did, right?
So, as I was to get back to the getting the personal property of people, as I would walk down the street, I would notice that there was bubbles of gas coming up from the gas mains. So I would kind of get an idea in my mind where they were, and when I would call the gas company and tell them where some of the leaks were, especially the big ones.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we'll go from there to the March '62 storm.
Good.
The March '62 storm hit, and Ebner's Dock, which is over here, it was a big dock. It was probably 24 by 24 with a handrail all on three sides.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that broke loose, and that floated right in the back of our house, and it smashed the back of the house in, and the storm broke the bottom half of the door off, and it smashed the metal siding on the garage and the door and everything there, smashed that all up. And then the bottom of the back door broke off, and along with the screen door, and swamp grass, crabs, small crabs, fish, everything floated in the house. And,
What a mess, huh? What a mess.
Yeah. So the beds all floated up the walls, and the china closet crashed into the dining room table, and all the silverware and all the dishes fell out in the swamp grass. So we had to, well, the first time we were allowed in, my father came with me, but he wasn't allowed in because he couldn't show a deed, and you had to show your deed to get into the property. So he stayed at the 9th Street gas station. So I came down and I worked sorting dishes, silverware, and swamp grass, and sorting everything out, and then took it back and had it washed. And then the next week we came down and it did more work because my dad could come with me, and we did more work. But everything was flooded, and then we went to the boathouse. And the boathouse, the back door ripped off, and I had cases of oil, outboard motor oil in there, and cases of engine oil, a lot of parts, and oars, and all kinds of assorted things like that, life preservers. So all that floated away. And the airboat could not rise up any further, and it hit the ceiling of the house and sank because of the guard on the airboat.
Keep on going.
And so that needed to be replaced. And the floating dock that I had, and the floating docks that I had, they all floated up to the causeway, the Sea Isle Causeway, which we found and later brought them back and of course they were all covered with swamp grass, and it was hard to find all these different things. And up there was also a whole lot of refrigerators, washing machines, and everything else that had floated away. And of course, in Strathmere and many of the houses floated off their foundations, or they were badly damaged. And a lot of the houses in Whale Beach floated off the foundations, and a lot of the things and their contents floated away. And in Whale Beach and Whale Creek, a lot of things floated away, and a house roof floated away into a creek there. So Dave Hall and myself decided, hey, let's build a ski jump from this roof. So we brought it back and cleaned it up and nailed masonite on it, and put it on a floating platform. And we fabricated this ski jump. And we had Richie Hollinger and a couple of the other younger fellows throwing water over it when we pulled it down here from the end of the ski ramp, launching ramp, to Whale Creek. And we anchored it there, and we water skied off it. And
So you had to have kids on top pouring water so you could get over it.
Yeah, we had Richie Hollinger and a couple others, so to make it a little more slippery, so that we could glide over it better.
Har, were you a skier at the time?
Pardon me?
Were you a skier?
Oh no, I was about 20. No, because I was a teenager when I moved here. Or not a teenager, but 22 when I moved here. But then now you got to go from 54 to 62.
Right,
so,
right.
I was.
So you're a young man.
I was an adult.
Yeah, but you went over the ski jump.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
we all went over, flew through the air. And a story is, and I never saw it, that somebody was taking 8mm videos, but I never saw them, and I don't know who has them.
Oh,
and
that would be a treat.
They never surfaced.
Oh, how about that?
But I guess they are around somewhere. Well, I'll tell you a story about that. George Welker came down with his camera, and he was going to take pictures of it, which he did. But he forgot one thing. He had already used that film to photograph his Christmas pageants and Christmas things. So here we are on this film, water skiing through his living room. So it was a double exposure. But then there was supposed to be somebody else that took halfway decent videos. But about 3 weeks later, after we used the ski jump ramp about 3 times, the harbor master, the Coast Guard, and the state police came down, and the youths, the kids were all there, and we were, using it and all. And they said, "Whose ramp is this?" Well, you know who they pointed to. So they came to me and they said, "Well, this is a hazard to navigation. Get it out of here." So we pulled it away and
had to take it down.
And that was the end of that.
Yeah.
But then to go a little further, later on, when we would have our crab fest and all at Welker's, we were up there one time, and a thresher shark was going around the pier, and it was a big one. The tail was sticking up, and it was swimming around. So we decided that we would lasso the tail, and we did. And we got it up over the bulkhead, and then, it's a thresher thrashes. So we called the Coast Guard, and they took it away in the truck. And where they took it, or what they did with it,
you don't know.
it didn't return anyway. So if you want to cut it off for a minute.
Okay, go ahead.
I was married to my wife Mary in 1966. my wife and I and my children spent a lot of time in Strathmere, and we really enjoyed it. But going back to the winters were bad in Strathmere. The ice on the bay sometimes was so thick that I could walk halfway across the bay. Also, the ice on the bay would come down in sheets, and it would pile up against the pilings and take the piers out and part of the bulkheads. In 1970, my wife and I had an addition made to the original house of where the metal garage was. We removed that, and they had fabricated a house built by Ridge Homes. Bob Zane bought a 40-foot Hatteras yacht and had it christened, and a christening party for the neighbors and a lot of friends. That he had catered by Brody's.
Brody's in Swedesboro,
Company
yes.
that had chickens.
Yeah, they were in Swedesboro.
Chickens from Swedesboro. Then later on, he named that Misty. And the other one was that Misty too?
Misty too,
Yeah. Then later on, I guess he outgrew that little tiny 40-foot boat, and he bought a beautiful, fantastic 60-foot Hatteras, and he had this yacht christened, and another party again for the neighbors and friends, and he housed the new yacht at his new house at the end of the street on the end of Bayview Drive.
Very good. That is. Well, Har, you've had a lot of years down here in Strathmere. You've raised your family. You've had a wonderful, wonderful time. You left Strathmere, though. You went offshore. I mean, you went inland.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the thing of it was, living on the bay, and with the ice, the upkeep is very expensive.
The winters are tough.
Yeah, the piers,
Uh-huh.
and then the barnacles and the worms eating your bulkhead.
Yeah.
It's just getting to be a very expensive proposition.
Well, I think you've had a wonderful time here.
We had a great time.
And you keep coming back. I've seen your boat go by sometimes,
yeah.
you know. So
yeah, I still fish here, and I love it here.
That's
have
good.
a lot of neighbors and friends, and a lot of good, fantastic memories. Mary, do you want to say anything?
I think you're a big part of the history of Strathmere.
The only thing that Mary wanted to add was that after I got rid of my ski jump, I decided, from Cypress Gardens, they had the kites that they towed in back of the boats.
All right.
So I got my friends, he would tow the boat, and I would get in back with a kite. And
that was quite a speedboat you had, too.
Yeah, it was a Stevens ski boat with a 350 horsepower Corvette engine. Well, 350. It wasn't 3 horsepower. It was a 350 cubic inch engine. And so anyway, he would come along. We'd get set because it would float on the water, and you'd be there with your water skis. Well, I told Frankie, I says, come on, give me more speed, more speed. You know, the water's coming over me. I'm about drowning, and my wife is having a fit. My mother's having a fit. So finally I got off the water and maneuvered a little bit, but I wasn't too good with it. So then, believe it or not, they come out with a regulation that you had to get a permit a month in advance from Trenton to fly the kite. So I sold it to the Philadelphia Ski Club, and that was the end of that.
Before we go, take off your glasses so we get a good look at you. Thank you.
I'll even take off these
Oh,
glasses.
now I know you. I know you now. Well, thank you so much, Har. It's been so enjoyable. I do appreciate it.
Well, it's been enjoyable for me to be down here with so many friends.
That's wonderful.
And people were so helpful and so courteous. They all were great people.
It's been great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.